For centuries, the Jewish people lived with a burning expectation of a coming Redeemer, a Messiah who would overthrow oppressors, restore Israel's sovereignty, and re-establish the throne of David. One of the most important scriptures shaping this expectation was Balaam's prophecy in Numbers 24:17. "A star shall come out of Jacob, and a scepter shall rise out of Israel." In Hebrew, the verse reads, "Darach kohav miakov, a star shall tread forth from Jacob." From the earliest days, Jewish interpreters connected this verse to a royal deliverer, one who would arise with divine authority and military might to shatter Israel's enemies. By the 2nd century, under the heavy boot of Rome, this prophecy was not merely a theological curiosity, it was the lifeline of hope for a crushed nation. It was in this context that Simon Bar Kokhba, a strong and charismatic leader, appeared on the stage. His leadership, bravery, and fierce dedication to Jewish independence caused Rabbi Akiva, one of the most revered rabbis in Jewish history, to rename him Bar Kokhba, son of the star. Akiva openly declared that this man was the Messiah foretold in Balaam's prophecy, the long-awaited Redeemer who would finally restore Israel. But history would prove that this messianic hope, when misdirected, could bring not salvation but devastation. 2. The Roman yoke and the seeds of revolt. To understand why so many rallied behind Bar Kokhba, we must look at the unbearable weight of Roman oppression. By the year 132 CE, Judea was a province broken and humiliated. The first Jewish revolt, 66 to 70 CE, had ended in the catastrophic destruction of the Temple, the burning of Jerusalem, and the slaughter of hundreds of thousands of Jews. The Temple Mount, once the meeting place of God and man, now stood in ruins, guarded by the soldiers of a foreign empire. Rome, however, did not stop with military conquest. Under Emperor Hadrian, policies were introduced that struck at the very core of Jewish identity. Circumcision banned. This was not simply a medical matter. It was an attack on the Abrahamic covenant itself, Genesis 17:10-14. For Jews, circumcision was the visible sign of belonging to God's chosen people. To ban it was to erase their covenant identity. Jerusalem, rebuilt as Aelia Capitolina, the holiest city of the Jewish people, was rebranded as a pagan Roman colony. On the Temple Mount itself, a temple to Jupiter was erected, desecrating the site that had once housed the presence of the Lord. Jewish exclusion from Jerusalem. Jews were forbidden to enter the city under penalty of death. To be cut off from Zion was to be cut off from the heartbeat of Jewish faith. Pagan colonization. Roman veterans were settled in Judea while Jewish lands were confiscated. Idolatry enforced. Sacred spaces were defiled by statues and sacrifices to pagan gods. These policies were not mere political oppression. They were seen by the Jewish people as an attempt to erase their covenant with God. This was not simply about land or taxes. It was about identity, worship, and destiny. It was in this climate of despair, humiliation, and burning hope for deliverance that Bar Kokhba arose. 3. Bar Kokhba's rise and the last great Jewish army. Simon Bar Kokhba was no ordinary leader. Unlike many who accepted Roman domination, he embodied fierce resistance. His name, originally Simon Bar Kokhba, was transformed by Akiva into Bar Kokhba, son of the star. But his opponents later twisted the name to Bar Kokhba, son of the lie. Bar Kokhba's movement was not merely political, it was messianic. He gathered farmers, craftsmen, peasants, and warriors into a force unlike anything seen since the days of the Maccabees. His fighters were motivated not only by patriotism, but by Torah and covenant loyalty. Historical accounts, such as those of Cassius Dio and later rabbinic writings, suggest his army may have numbered 200,000, 400,000 fighters. While ancient sources often exaggerate, there is no doubt that his force was vast by the standards of the time. Discipline was strict. Bar Kokhba demanded purity, loyalty, and strength. According to some traditions, recruits were tested under brutal conditions to prove their endurance. Guerrilla tactics were used, hideouts in caves, surprise attacks, and fortified strongholds gave his forces an edge against Rome's legions. Coins were minted in his name. Bar Kokhba issued silver coins, striking over Roman currency with Hebrew inscriptions such as, "For the freedom of Jerusalem, Laharot Yerushalayim, Year 1 of the redemption of Israel." This was more than rebellion. It was a declaration of sovereignty. Bar Kokhba was not just fighting Rome, he was re-establishing a Jewish state, complete with its own government, currency, and religious life. For a time, it seemed as though the prophecy of Numbers 24:17 was coming true before their very eyes. 4. The War against Rome, 132 to 135 CE. The revolt began in 132 CE, and at first the Jews experienced stunning success. Entire Roman garrisons were destroyed. The legions, normally feared across the empire, were humiliated. Even the mighty Emperor Hadrian was alarmed. He summoned his best general, Julius Severus, from Britain, along with reinforcements from as far away as Gaul and the Danube. This was no small uprising. It had become one of the greatest military crises Rome ever faced. Rome changed its strategy. Instead of engaging Bar Kokhba's forces in large-scale battles where they had already suffered defeats, Severus resorted to attrition warfare, cutting off supplies, isolating towns, and starving the rebels. Scorched earth tactics. Villages were burned, crops destroyed, and populations massacred. Siege warfare. Strongholds were surrounded, one by one, until they fell. It was a slow, brutal campaign. The land of Judea was devastated, its people slaughtered in numbers so vast that Cassius Dio later wrote, 50 of their most important outposts and 985 of their most famous villages were razed to the ground. 580,000 men were slain in the various raids and battles. The cost to Rome was staggering, but the cost to Israel was catastrophic. 5. The fall of Beitar, the Messiah slain. The final stand of Bar Kokhba came at Beitar, his last fortress, in the year 135 CE. Jewish tradition holds that Beitar fell on Tisha B'Av, the same date on which both the first and second temples had been destroyed, a chilling sign of divine judgment. When Beitar fell, the consequences were horrific. Bar Kokhba was killed. Some accounts say he was slain by Roman forces, others that he was betrayed. Either way, the Messiah of Israel lay dead. Mass slaughter followed. Tens of thousands of men, women, and children were killed. According to rabbinic tradition, the Romans did not allow the dead to be buried for a long time, leaving bodies rotting in the open. The dream of restoration was shattered. The hope of a Davidic kingdom under Bar Kokhba's leadership collapsed in a single day. Rabbi Akiva, who had declared Bar Kokhba the Messiah, was tortured and executed by the Romans. In later rabbinic memory, Bar Kokhba was renamed Bar Kokhba, son of the lie. His failed revolt became a cautionary tale of misplaced hope. 6. Hadrian's final humiliation. Judea erased. For Emperor Hadrian, the revolt was not only to be crushed, it was to be erased from memory. His policies after 135 CE were designed to obliterate Jewish identity. Judea was renamed Syria Palestina. By adopting the name of Israel's ancient enemies, the Philistines, Hadrian sought to sever the Jewish people's connection to their own land. Jerusalem remained Aelia Capitolina. Jews were permanently banned from entering, except on one day of the year, Tisha B'Av, when they were allowed to weep at the ruins from afar. Jewish practices outlawed. Torah study, Sabbath observance, circumcision, and public worship were all restricted. This was more than conquest, it was cultural genocide. Hadrian attempted to erase not just the Jewish people from Judea, but their very memory and covenant identity. 7. Spiritual lessons and warnings. The story of Bar Kokhba is both inspiring and tragic. It is inspiring because it demonstrates the courage of a people who refuse to bow to idolatry or foreign domination. It shows the fire of messianic hope that burned in Jewish hearts. But it is tragic because it reveals the danger of misplaced messianic hope. Bar Kokhba had zeal, courage, and determination, but he was not the Messiah. The true Messiah, Yeshua of Nazareth, had already come decades earlier. Unlike Bar Kokhba, he did not seek to establish his kingdom by the sword. Instead, he fulfilled Zechariah's prophecy. "Behold, your king is coming to you. Righteous and having salvation is he, humble and mounted on a donkey." Zechariah 9:9. And he declared before Pilate, "My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight." John 18:36. When a nation rejects the true Messiah, false messiahs will arise. Yeshua himself warned, "For false Christs and false prophets will arise, and perform great signs and wonders, so as to lead astray, if possible, even the elect." Matthew 24:24. The Bar Kokhba revolt is a sobering lesson. Zeal without truth leads to destruction. 8. Prophetic aftermath. Hadrian's attempt to erase Israel from history failed. Though Judea was renamed and the Jewish people scattered across the nations, the prophets had spoken of a day when God would gather his people back. "I will restore the fortunes of my people Israel. They shall rebuild the ruined cities and inhabit them, and they shall never again be uprooted from the land that I have given them, says the Lord your God." Amos 9:14-15. For nearly 1,900 years, the Jewish people wandered in exile. Yet, in the 20th century, against all odds, Israel was reborn. The name that Hadrian tried to erase has returned. The covenant that Rome tried to bury has proven indestructible. Summary and PowerPoints. Simon Bar Kokhba was hailed by Rabbi Akiva as the Messiah, fulfilling the prophecy of Numbers 24:17, but in the wrong way and wrong time. His revolt against Rome, 132 to 135 CE, shook the empire and nearly succeeded, but ultimately ended in catastrophic defeat. The fall of Beitar and the renaming of Judea to Syria Palestina led to centuries of Jewish exile. Spiritually, the revolt stands as a warning against misplaced messianic hope and a reminder that the true Messiah is Yeshua, not a political warrior. Prophetically, it points to the truth that God's covenant people can never be erased. Even after centuries of exile, Israel has been restored, just as God promised.